Hello, welcome back. Today we're here to talk about 2013's The Wolverine. So let me just preface this by saying this is my first time watching this movie. I don't know if I was the right audience member for it because I'm not apparently a huge fan of Wolverine. I don't dislike him. I don't find him all that interesting, or at least I haven't found either of the two movies that have been purely about him very interesting that I've seen.
Fair.
But moving forward, let's go ahead and talk about the plot and story. So this one is interesting the way that they tell it. It's very different. It's more of a mystery story. Basically, you get Logan, who saved this Japanese soldier back in World War II times from a nuke, cuts down to present time, and he's still pining over, what is that girl's name he killed in Last Stand?
The Phoenix. Her name is...
Jean Grey.
Jean Grey.
Yeah, he killed Jean Grey, and Last Stand, he's been mourning over it ever since. And then he finds out that the Japanese soldier he saved in World War II is dying and requests that he goes to Japan to say his goodbyes. Turns out he actually wants to get Wolverine's powers to make it so he can live and survive this, and then Wolverine will become mortal. Wolverine says no, he dies, and then...
And we all thought he was dead. Every one of us. Don't you lie. You thought he was dead.
Right. Anyway, spoiler alert, he's not. But anyway... he dies, and then, but right before he dies, he says, hey, they're going to kill my granddaughter, and so Wolverine goes on this protective mission to save the guy's granddaughter.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the story of the Wolverine. The issue I had with the story is, up until the last scene,
you don't know what's happening.
You don't know what's happening. You don't get anybody's motivation for why they're doing what they're doing. And it's just it becomes a story about him trying to save a girl that you don't feel like he has a connection to, and that you don't feel any chemistry between. And then they have the nerve to actually have them try to have some sort of romance, and it was really bad.
Yeah, they really didn't need to do that.
Yeah, I really hoped that they.
But you have to understand that they were outside in the rain together, and in movie logic, that means that they have to make love.
I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't buy it, and anyway, it was kind of. Now, I'm not going to say I was, actively hating the movie the whole time, because I wasn't. I was actually feeling pretty indifferent about the movie the whole time.
Which is crazy to me.
But I think the reason I was feeling indifferent is because the story wasn't told in a way that made me... It didn't make me, care, because I didn't understand what was happening, and no one's motivation seemed solid. There were characters, and I'll get more into this later, but there were characters who were sometimes good in what they were doing, and sometimes bad in what they were doing.
And you didn't know why. And so I'm like,
it feels like things are just kind of happening, and until the end. And then I'm just going to go ahead and spoil what happens in the end. So if you've never seen this movie, feel free to stop watching here. The guy's alive, and he had this really ridiculously complex plot to get Wolverine to come meet him at the end so he could suck out his powers, when he didn't need to do that, and it wouldn't have worked.
He kind of did. All right, let me give you my take on this, all right? I love how this movie was done because they took a big step away from how superhero movies have been done to this point. Most superhero movies, and especially in the MCU, you find out who the villain is at some point during Act 1 or Act 2. And you are third-person omniscient. You know everything that's going on, and the hero doesn't, but you do. So when your hero walks into a building and you know the villain is there, you yell at the screen, right? This movie, you do not have that omniscience. You are following the Wolverine, and anywhere he goes, you go. Anything that's confusing to him is confusing to you. You don't know anything about anything that he doesn't know.
But you do have a few scenes.
A couple of scenes that you learn, that some of these characters are still moving pieces. But the important thing is that he's kind of getting dragged around on this journey, and he doesn't know where it's going. And neither do you. And that is fine for me. It felt more like a mystery. It felt more like Clue. You all got invited to a mansion. Why are we here?
Yeah.
Because Mr. Body is dead. And that's what this movie is about. Mr. Body is dead. And it was Miss Scarlet. Probably. Anyway, so the other thing is that... he kind of did need to get there because the Silver Samurai suit was there, and it was told that it became clear that if Wolverine didn't present himself to this, then it was going to be very difficult because they needed to extract bone marrow. And so they needed to get him to extract his claws. Then they needed to cut off those claws using superheated adamantium. And then they needed to dig into his bones to get the bone marrow in order to do it. And that just wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So it made sense. It was a little hard to follow, but that was the point, in my opinion. That's what I understand about the movie. And I gave it a 4.5. I think that the plot and story of this movie was excellent.
See, and I gave it a 2, mostly because I struggled caring, but the other thing is it felt really absurd the way that they got him there. And what you're saying makes sense. I understand why he needed to get him there and to make all that happen. But he told the Wolverine... So, I mean, this plan was in the works before the Wolverine even showed up, because in his will, he gave all his stuff to his granddaughter so that his son would get angry, so that his son would try to kill his granddaughter, so Wolverine would have to protect his granddaughter. And then he banked on the fact that Wolverine would protect his granddaughter. And then they had this big thing, and then they had to make sure that his son actually didn't kill his daughter, even though that's what he was going to try to do. There was just so many pieces in it, and it was just... So many things were left up to chance.
There's movie convenience.
There's a lot of movie convenience in it, and it was hard to buy into. Even at the very end, when finally it all makes sense, because he's explaining it all, I'm like, it didn't quite have the payoff that I think it should have, for me anyway. And again, maybe I'm just not the right audience for this movie. For whatever reason, I didn't buy into the story all that much. I gave it a 2. It's not terrible. I just didn't like it all that much.
Give to me. I don't need anything.
Not a thing. Eternity can be a curse. It hasn't been easy for you, living without time. The losses you have had to suffer. A man can run out of things to live for. Lose his purpose. Become a ronin. A samurai without a master. I can end your eternity. Make you mortal.
The acting in this movie was as good as you could pretty much expect. I mean, there was a couple of weak links. Obviously, Hugh Jackman wasn't one of them. I didn't... Actually, for the most part, there weren't any actors that I, actively didn't like. There were some that I was just like, all right, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of that were, the guy's granddaughter or Wolverine's love interest for some reason. She was fine. It wasn't there wasn't anything mind-boggling there. And that was just kind of the theme through a lot of, the side characters. Main characters were all fine, as far as acting is concerned. What I will say is that the characters are a little weak in this one.
Yeah, and that's one of the big issues I have. Acting is fine, like Ben said, but the characters I didn't understand, and I don't think the movie really fleshed out most of their motivations super well. One of the biggest cases of this for me was actually the Viper lady.
Yeah, I don't know why she was there.
She was there because she had mutant powers that made it so Wolverine would lose his ability to self-heal, and that's fine. But, why was she working with the bad guy? I assume it was
the only
for
explanation
money.
they gave is because she was crazy.
Because she was crazy?
That's the only explanation that was ever given in the movie.
I don't even remember them giving that. I mean,
it was,
she's
it was
crazy,
like
but...
her. It was like the girl's boyfriend, the archer. He was like, obviously she's crazy, but she's immune to the end.
Well, okay, yeah. So she just she had no reason to be doing what she was doing or be so devoted to what she was doing. She was basically trying to save the old Asian, Chinese, Japanese war vet. But for whatever reason, she didn't make a lot of sense. And then really, there's two girls that kind of got a chance to be with Wolverine. There was one who was a mutant, maybe, but she could kind of see how people would die. And then she was a ninja. And then there was the girl that Wolverine was protecting. They honestly probably should have just combined those two characters and made them, made Wolverine go on a quest with just one of them instead of having them both in there, because neither of them had a chance to be as cool as they could have been.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they were balancing between the two. So I didn't like that.
I think they should have focused on the girl with the katana. She was tight.
No, she should. They should have. Yeah. What I think they should have done, here's what I'm going to do. They should have just killed the princess in the beginning and then have the story be about Wolverine and
solving
the katana trying to solve it. We'll see what happened there.
Yeah, that wouldn't have made as much sense, probably.
I think I would have enjoyed that storyline better.
Maybe.
I think that...
he's not a detective. He's not Batman.
He's not a detective, sure, but she might have been. I don't know.
Well,
they could have done something there.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I will agree they didn't live up to their standards. Here's the thing. I gave it a 3.5 as far as the acting goes, and most of that goes towards acting.
Yeah.
And then characters really didn't get that many points. I liked what they did with Wolverine's character in this movie. I liked that he was a little bit more heroic and not as animalistic as he has been previously. I also liked that he felt a great deal of remorse from what happened in the last movie. I feel like we don't get a lot of that. I mean, we had like Civil War, where only one character felt a lot of remorse for things that happened. So I just feel like we don't get a lot of superheroes realizing, hey, we kill people sometimes, and that's not cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else I will say, though, I did like that part of it, and I thought it was interesting that they took Wolverine's healing factor away, because then he actually had to, like,
be human
learn
for a
how
while.
to human fight and things like that. But I will say, even Wolverine's motivation for why he was dedicated as much to us protecting the princess wasn't really obvious or there.
It wasn't fleshed out, but it just kind of showed that he's a good guy.
Sure.
I guess.
I don't feel like it really
comic
fit his
Wolverine
character.
isn't much of a good guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, from what I've seen in the X-Men movies up to this point, it doesn't really fit Wolverine. I mean, it kind of does, because he protected Rogue for no reason in particular.
Well, and he did make a promise to Jean and himself, really, because Jean was dead, that he wasn't going to
kill anybody.
Well, that he wasn't going to kill anybody, and that he was only going to, like, save lives and stuff. He did, put a poisoned dipped arrow into a man's hand.
Yeah, I don't feel like he was really living up to that promise. I didn't understand.
That man killed a bear.
Sure, yeah.
He had it coming.
I guess. Anyway, I gave it a 2.5. I think the acting was fine. I will say I think Hugh Jackman came more into his element in this one than he was in some of the previous X-Men movies. I think he did a lot better with Wolverine. But even that, I didn't think the characters were compelling. I didn't think that the motivations were fleshed out. It was kind of just a mediocre film to me on an acting and characters front.
And that's a poison, broadhead, which last I heard was illegal. Go ahead, ask me where I found it. Ask me.
Where did you find it?
Well, funny you should ask. I pulled it out of the back of a grizzly. Whoever shot it didn't have the wind or the balls to track the animal properly and put it out of its misery.
When it comes to the action of the film, I do think they actually did pretty good. Some scenes that stand out to me. There's a scene where they're on a train and they're fighting, and this one is not Spider-Man 2 style where you can actually like fight, because they're crouching down the whole time, and it's mostly actually just obstacles that they have to avoid. Which I enjoyed that. I thought that was kind of a fun little touch.
It would make a good video game.
Yeah, it would. That would be a fun level.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. I also like there's a scene where they're just tanking our man with arrows, and he just doesn't care. Like he just
pushing forward.
Yeah, that was a pretty fun scene to watch.
That's my dude.
There's also a scene I enjoyed where he finally gets his healing factor back, and he's sword fighting with this guy with his claws,
which is sick.
That's a good scene.
It's pretty much every action, and this movie had a lot of action.
It's very action heavy.
This movie, it kind of, in a weird way, kind of felt like Jason Bourne a little bit, like the first one.
A little
where
bit,
there's like a lot of mystery going on, but still a ton of action.
A lot
Too
of
much action? Maybe.
Maybe. It was very...
I didn't think so.
I didn't feel like it was too much action. I
Fun.
enjoyed the action in the movie, but I will say at one point I was like, I don't think I've seen a superhero movie this action-packed.
Yeah.
Really ever up to this point, because
they don't take a lot of time.
They don't really do that.
Because they don't need to do any exposition.
Yeah.
And they don't really need to like introduce the villains that much, because a lot of it, and then since it takes place in Japan, they try to pay homage to a lot of like ninja and like that kind of culture.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of the reasons that they made the characters the way that they did was because that like fighting style is mystery.
Yeah.
And so you see shadows a lot of the time instead of people, and so it was really, I liked the action in this movie. I think that was a highlight of the movie. In fact, I gave it a 5.
I gave it a 3.5, and the reason is I think it's good. I do. I enjoy the action scenes, but when I think of superhero action scenes, I don't think there's a scene from this movie that's going to pop into my mind. I think that there are scenes from Spider-Man that will. I think there are scenes from some Batman movies that will. There's even a scene like from Thor that does, for whatever reason, when I think about action scenes. But for the Wolverine, as good as they are, I think they're good for me when I'm watching, but not after. I don't think they don't think they're going to come to me after.
Eric's problem with this movie is because it didn't meet his expectations of what a superhero movie should be.
It could, yeah. I mean,
because I think if you had taken away the superhero aspects of this movie and just considered it a spy thriller, you would have enjoyed it a lot more.
But I'm rating this based on a superhero scale.
Sure, but
and that's why it holds it back.
And I guess the difference is that for me, those things are interchangeable. Because it's not the same. It's the same scale for every movie, you know. And when people say, "Well, it's not good for a regular movie, but it's good for a superhero movie," I'm like, "Well, so it was a bad movie." I don't know what you mean. To me, if it's a good movie, then it's a good superhero movie. You know, I think that we've gotten to the point where they are so in the box office that we can't separate them anymore. So I think that this movie, as it stands, is excellent. And we're going to have very distinct scores in this movie.
Yeah, we have very different scores for this one.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, we're all allowed to have our opinions. But I think that what we need to remember is that his isn't right. So, if you haven't seen this movie, do me a favor. Watch it and then like it. Because if you don't, then your opinion is wrong too.
Cinematically, I think this movie is very good. I think cinematically they did what they wanted to do, and it worked really well. I think that, first of all, I'm just going to address the elephant in the room. Hugh Jackman looks great in this film.
Oh my gosh, I swooned.
He is so ripped and cut in this film. And I wanted to talk about it in cinematics because for the vast majority of this movie, he's shirtless.
Oh, yeah.
He does not have...
excellent
his
choice.
Costume design for this film is some pants. That is it. And honestly, that's all they needed.
Yeah.
And he looks great, and his claws look significantly better than they ever have.
A huge improvement.
Yeah. So and the set and the where they are in Japan is beautiful. It looks great. The shots look great. Oh. I think everything sounded and looked...
The tone for me was perfect.
The tone works. The tone works for what they wanted to do. The writing worked for what they wanted to do. I think cinematically, this is very easily the best X-Men movie that we've had.
Yeah.
We've
had some good ones.
I enjoy it. In fact, I'm not saying... I mean, this is actually probably one of my least favorite X-Men movies that we've had. But cinematically speaking, it's one of the best ones. I think it stands out a lot more than any of the other ones do on a cinematic scale.
Absolutely. Another thing that really helps the mood. The score of this movie, when there is music, is pretty normal for a movie. You don't really I can't hum it or anything like that. It's good. But there were scenes in this movie where there's no music, and you don't realize how much music there are in movies until all of a sudden they take it out. When it's silent.
Yeah.
When he's walking through the streets and it's silent, and you're like, what's going to happen? It almost felt to me like, and I don't know who directed this movie.
I don't even know.
I don't remember the name of who directed this movie. But shout outs to my man's, or woman's.
Who knows?
You know?
Yeah.
I think it was a man, though.
Probably, honestly.
But shout out to him because it kind of felt almost like a horror movie where there's a lot of suspense building up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of suspense, and they're walking, and you know, Wolverine's like looking around. I'm thinking specifically there's a scene where they're at the funeral of the old man, and Wolverine's looking around. He knows that something's not right, but he's not sure what it is, and it's dead silent. You can feel the suspense building, and then there's the explosion. It just felt right.
It did. No, it really did, and I will say that they did a good job with that. I gave it a 4 on a cinematic scale. I don't really know why I didn't give it anything higher than that. I don't have any gripes with it. I guess it doesn't stand out maybe as much as other ones do, and that might be why.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a great cinematic movie. Cinematically, it's very
sure.
good.
Well, when you talk about like the best directed movies of all time, the Wolverine from 2013 isn't going to be on the list.
No.
So I can't give it a 5.
Yeah.
But I think a 4.5 is fair.
Yeah.
I think, especially given what we've seen so far, I think it's fair. One of the action sequences that you had talked about earlier was when he finally gets his healing factor back and he's fighting the dad, and the whole scene takes place almost in the dark. And that scene stands out to me because you mostly see like silhouettes of things happening. But you see, there's one scene where you realize that they've both stabbed each other. But the thing is that Wolverine can just tank a stabbing. Like, that's not a big deal. But the other guy, not so much.
Yeah.
And so, and you see that, like, in a silhouette, and you're like, oh, it's just, the movie's great. The cinematics in this movie are wonderful.
Yeah.
But, again, if I were going to say, like, the best directed movies of all time, the best written movies of all time, the best, the best set design, this isn't going to be there.
No.
It's not going to be there. Is it some of the best on this list of movies that we're reviewing? Yeah, for sure. For sure. But it's not of all time. So I'm not going to give it a 5. It didn't do anything that was spectacularly different.
Yeah.
But it certainly held its own.
It did good.
Logan.
Hey! Sorry! Sorry! Sorry!
On an entertainment scale, and again, this comes down to maybe I just wasn't in the right mood or I wasn't the right audience for it, but I felt extremely indifferent about this movie. I didn't dislike it. There was nothing about it except for maybe a little bit of the story that I was like, oh, I don't like that. I just didn't find myself caring. I didn't find myself getting into it. And again, I don't know why. I've only seen it once. Maybe if I watch it again, it'll change my mind on a lot of this. But for whatever reason, as I was watching it, I just kind of felt like I could go either way. I could either finish it or I could turn it off. I didn't want to turn it off. But if something had pulled me away from the movie, I don't know if I would have gone back and finished it.
See, that's crazy to me. This is probably going to be one of the movies that I've watched the most in this whole list. Well, other than the first 4 Batman movies, because we got those when I was pretty young, so I watched those a lot.
Yeah.
But this movie I've seen many times, and I've enjoyed it every time, and I'll probably watch it many more times. I will say that while I was watching it, and right after, I rated it as a 3.5 in the entertainment value. But like looking back on it, I'm like, oh, man, I should have liked that even more because I did like every individual element of it. But what I will say is that there are some scenes that are kind of slow. Now, when he doesn't have his healing factor, and he's wounded, and they're in some, I think they said they were in the south part of Japan, and they're just kind of playing like house couple. Kind of weird and not super entertaining.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that those scenes felt few and far between. So, I gave it a 3.5, but it was good.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I gave it a 2.5 because I didn't feel one way or another about it on an entertainment scale. But like I said, maybe this is one of the movies you'll watch again and you like it more than the first time. It wasn't what it didn't do much for me. I didn't really have any expectations for it, to be honest, because I didn't know what to expect. I know I didn't like X-Men Origins Wolverine, but I knew that this one was supposed to be a lot better than that, so I wasn't going to compare it. But either way, I gave it a 2.9 out of 5.
Wild.
I think that it's above average altogether. I can't give it the full even 3 points because to say that I actively liked it, it seems a little bit more of a stretch. I like it more than I dislike it, probably, but it's just kind of one of those movies I felt pretty mediocre about.
Yeah, I think that I haven't really done the math, and so it's probably wrong, and maybe I'll do the math later. I don't know. But it probably landed around a 4.2 or a 4.3 for me. We'll go 4.3.
Yeah, so we have a very different score for this movie. So, like we were saying, when we watched The Amazing Spider-Man, I think we're going to have a lot more differing opinions coming into these later ones.
I agree with that.
Because these later ones we've watched more than some of those earlier ones that we watched.
I don't know. I watched the Batman movies a lot.
Well, like the Batman was an exception, but like you and I did not watch Superman growing up. We didn't watch Fantastic Four or those old X-Men movies or Daredevil or Elektra.
I watched a lot of the X-Men movies quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. We're gonna start having differing opinions, and I think that another part of that is gonna be because my standard for these movies is that they should be good as movies and not just as superhero movies. Mm-hmm. And I think that your standard for these movies is different.
Yeah.
So I think that we are going to see some differing opinions. We still like each other, even though he's wrong. And so, when we add our scores together, what did you give it? A 2.9, and I gave it a 4.3.
That's a really big jump.
That's a big jump. It's going to end up being like a 3.6. Yep, it's exactly a 3.6. So watch it. What are you doing?
I'd say watch it. Let us know how you feel about it. Which one of us you agree more with. It's fine. Yeah, I'm just gonna put it that way.
And okay, while we're at it, like the video, comment how you feel about it. Subscribe to the channel because next time we're gonna be posting an awesome video where we light a Denny's on fire.
No, we won't. But we will be posting an awesome video of our review of 2013's Thor: The Dark World. So, this one gets a lot of hate from a lot of people, so we'll see how we feel about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you later. Bye.
So, where do you want to go?
Let's just start with up.
And then?
We'll see.
Interesting.